It was a November night when the most elegant restaurant in New York City transformed into an emotional battlefield. Alexander Mendoza, the pharmaceutical industry billionaire, sat helpless while his 8-year-old son Lucas screamed desperately, covering his ears with his hands in the middle of an autistic crisis. Other customers murmured in annoyance. The staff didn't know how to intervene, and Alexander felt the weight of critical stares from hundreds of people. Just when he was about to get up and flee with his son, a young waitress named Sofia approached the table. What she did in that moment left everyone speechless, and forever changed the life of a father who had lost hope and a child who fought every day to be understood. Because sometimes it takes a brave stranger to teach the world that true love doesn't make noise, it whispers. What city are you watching this video from and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. The Palace restaurant was the symbol of New York elegance, located in a 19th century mansion in the Upper East Side. With hand-painted ceilings and Waterford crystal chandeliers, it attracted the Spanish and international elite. That November night, Alexander Mendoza had reserved the best table for an important dinner with Japanese investors. At 40 years old, Alexander was one of the richest men in America. He had transformed Mendoza Pharmaceuticals into an international colossus. But all the success in the world couldn't prepare him for the challenges of being father to Lucas, an 8-year-old boy with high-functioning autism. Lucas was beautiful, with his father's green eyes and extraordinary intelligence that manifested in unpredictable ways. He knew the periodic table by heart, solved complex mathematical equations, but couldn't tolerate certain sounds or changes in routine. His ex-wife, Francisca, hadn't been able to bear the weight of raising a special needs child, and had abandoned father and son when Lucas was 4 years old. That night, Alexander had brought Lucas hoping the controlled and refined environment could work. He had reserved a secluded table, explained the situation to the staff, prepared everything down to the last detail. The Japanese investors were understanding and interested in also knowing the more human aspect of their potential partner, but the best plans can crumble in an instant. It all began when a waiter accidentally dropped a tray of crystal glasses. The sharp and unexpected noise hit Lucas like an arrow. The boy began to rock in his chair, covering his ears with his hands and emitting sounds of distress. Alexander immediately recognized the signs, quickly apologized to the investors and focused on Lucas, trying all the techniques he had learned over the years. But this time was different. The boy exploded in a complete crisis. High-pitched screams, repetitive arm movements, tears running down his face while he desperately tried to communicate a pain he couldn't explain. The restaurant stopped. Interrupted conversations, turning stares, whispers of disapproval. Alexander felt the heat of shame rise to his cheeks, not because of Lucas, but because of the ignorance of the people surrounding them. He saw the waiters who didn't know how to behave, the maitre d' approaching worried, the Japanese investors trying to hide their discomfort. He was used to controlling everything, business meetings, million-dollar mergers, market strategies, but faced with his son's crisis, he felt completely helpless. There were no protocols to follow, immediate solutions. There was only a child suffering and a father who would have given anything to help him. Lucas continued screaming, his small body shaken by an emotional storm he couldn't control. Alexander took him in his arms, whispering words of comfort, but he knew he had to get him out of there. He was about to stand up, already imagining the next day's newspaper headlines, when he noticed a figure approaching his table. It was a young waitress, perhaps 25 years old, with long brown hair pulled back and kind eyes, showing no judgment or annoyance. She moved with calm and determination, as if she knew exactly what to do. Alexander couldn't imagine that this stranger was about to change his life and Lucas's, in ways that went beyond any expectation. Sofia Herrera was 26 years old and had worked at the Palace restaurant for 3 years. She had arrived in New York City from a small town in the South with a dream, to become a therapist for children with special needs. She worked nights to support herself while studying psychology at Columbia University during the day. She was used to observing people, catching details that others ignored. That night, from the moment Alexander and Lucas entered the restaurant, Sofia had noticed them. There was something in the delicacy with which the father guided the boy, in the way he controlled every detail of the environment that had made her understand this wasn't a normal dinner. When Lucas began his crisis, Sofia didn't see a badly behaved child bothering others. She saw a child in distress who needed help. Without asking permission from the maitre d', Sofia approached the table. She ignored the looks from her colleagues and the murmurs from other customers. She knelt beside Lucas, placing herself at his visual level, and did something surprising. She began to breathe visibly and rhythmically, exactly as she had learned during her studies on sensory disorders. She didn't say a word, didn't touch Lucas. She simply breathed deeply, creating a calm and constant rhythm. Then, with slow and deliberate movements, she took from her apron pocket a small colorful fabric cube with different textures, smooth, rough, soft. It was a sensory object she always carried with her since she had begun studying therapies for autism. Alexander watched her in disbelief. No one had ever approached Lucas during a crisis with that naturalness, that instinctive understanding of what it meant to be overwhelmed by sensory stimuli. Sofia placed the cube on the table near Lucas, but without forcing him to take it. Gradually, Lucas's screams began to diminish. The boy, still agitated, noticed the cube and Sofia's calm presence. His eyes, swollen with tears, fixed on her. Sofia continued breathing deeply, becoming an anchor of tranquility in the middle of the emotional chaos. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably 5 minutes, Lucas extended a trembling hand toward the cube, touched it delicately, exploring the different textures with his fingertips. The contact with something predictable and controllable began to calm him. Sofia remained motionless, respecting his timing, his need to process what was happening. The restaurant slowly began to return to normal. Customers resumed their conversations, waiters returned to their service. But around Alexander and Lucas's table, a bubble of peace had been created that no one dared to disturb. When Lucas was completely calm, Sofia stood up slowly and explained to Alexander that his son was fine. Sometimes overly stimulating environments can be difficult to handle, and he had done very well staying calm without forcing him. Alexander looked at her with eyes full of gratitude and surprise. This waitress spoke like a specialist. She demonstrated an understanding of autism that he had taken years to acquire. When he asked how she knew these things, Sofia explained simply that she was studying psychology and specializing in autism spectrum disorders. In that moment, Alexander understood he had found something rare and valuable, a person who saw Lucas not as a problem to solve, but as a child to understand. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in his daily battle to help his son. In the following days, Alexander couldn't stop thinking about Sofia, her competence, the naturalness in handling Lucas's crisis, the way she had transformed a moment of shame into a lesson in humanity. He did research and discovered that Sofia Herrera was indeed a psychology student with excellent grades who was writing her thesis on sensory disorders in autism. A week later, Alexander returned to the Palace restaurant with Lucas. This time he had no work appointments or external pressures. He simply wanted to see if that night had been a lucky coincidence, or if Sofia really possessed something special. When Sofia saw them enter, her face lit up with a genuine smile. She approached their table with the same naturalness as always, but this time Lucas recognized her immediately. The boy, who usually distrusted strangers, smiled at her shyly and took from his pocket the sensory cube that Sofia had given him that night. Sofia knelt again at his level and noticed Lucas had brought the cube. When she asked if it had been useful, the boy nodded and in a whispered voice explained that he liked the soft part. When he was angry, he touched it and thought about clouds. Alexander was amazed. Lucas rarely spoke with strangers, and when he did, they were usually brief and functional phrases. But with Sofia, he was sharing something personal, a coping mechanism he had developed alone. During dinner, Sofia passed by their table several times, not only for service, but to interact with Lucas. She showed him how to fold napkins into animal shapes. She explained why the restaurant's lights were warm instead of cold. She let him touch different textures of the restaurant's materials. It was as if she had an invisible manual on how to communicate with children on the autism spectrum. Alexander watched her fascinated. After years of therapists, specialists, and various consultants, he finally saw someone who related to Lucas naturally and spontaneously. There were no forced techniques or rigid protocols. There was only genuine understanding and interest in his son's unique world. At the end of the night, While paying the bill, Alexander asked Sofia if they could talk privately. She agreed to meet after her shift at a cafe near the restaurant. Alexander confessed he didn't know how to thank her for what she had done. Lucas was special, but not everyone understood him. Sofia smiled sweetly, explaining that every child is special. Lucas just had a different way of perceiving the world. Once you learn to see through their eyes, everything makes sense. Alexander felt something deep move in his chest. This young woman had just described in one sentence what had taken him years to understand. When he asked if she had ever thought about working privately as a therapist or consultant, Sofia explained she was finishing her studies and hoped to open a center for children with special needs someday. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue with the video. But for now, she needed to work to support herself. Alexander made a decision that would change everything. He asked if she would be interested in an arrangement that would help her realize that dream in exchange for her help with him and Lucas. It wasn't just a professional proposal. Alexander had seen something in Sofia that went beyond competence. He had seen someone who sincerely loved what she did, who saw potential where others saw problems. Alexander's proposal was more generous than Sofia had dared to hope. He offered her to finish her studies with a full scholarship, become Lucas's private therapist with a salary that would allow her to concentrate only on her studies and the boy, and above all, he promised he would help her realize her dream of opening a center for children with special needs. Sofia accepted without hesitation, not only for the economic opportunity, but because she had seen something special in the relationship between Alexander and Lucas, a father who loved his son unconditionally, and a brilliant boy who only needed the right keys to open up to the world. In the following months, Sofia became a constant presence in the Mendoza family's life. She worked with Lucas 3 times a week, developing personalized strategies to help him handle social and sensory situations. But her approach was different from all previous therapists. She didn't try to change Lucas, but to teach the world how to communicate with him. The progress was extraordinary. Lucas began to express his feelings using a color card system that Sofia had developed. He learned breathing techniques to manage anxiety. Above all, he began to trust adults in a way Alexander had never seen before. But the most surprising change concerned Alexander himself. Through Sofia, he began to see Lucas not as a child to protect from the world, but as a child to prepare for the world. He learned to recognize his son's sensory triggers, to create more welcoming environments, to communicate in ways that respected his unique style of processing information. One night, while Sofia was helping Lucas with homework in Alexander's villa library, the boy did something that left both adults speechless. He got up from the table, went to Sofia, and hugged her spontaneously, telling her in a clear voice that he thanked her for teaching him that his brain wasn't broken, just different. Sofia felt tears sting her eyes. Those words represented everything she had studied and worked for, and Alexander, observing the scene from the doorway, understood that Sofia wasn't just an exceptional therapist. She had become part of his family. In the following months, the relationship between Alexander and Sofia deepened beyond the professional aspect. They shared dinners together, talked for hours about Lucas's progress and their dreams for the future. Alexander discovered in Sofia an intelligent, passionate, and deeply empathetic woman. Sofia saw in Alexander not just a successful man, but a devoted father who had sacrificed much to give his son the best. The attraction was undeniable, but both kept it under control out of respect for Lucas and the professional situation. Until a spring night, when Lucas himself innocently asked Sofia if she wanted to become his heart mom, since the real one didn't know how to love special children. That question opened a conversation that Alexander and Sofia had been avoiding for months. They realized that what they felt was authentic and deep, based on shared values and a common love for Lucas. 1 year after that memorable night at the Palace restaurant, Sofia was no longer just Lucas's therapist. She had become his mother figure, Alexander's partner, and the pillar of a family that had found its unique balance. The Center for Children with Special Needs that Sofia had always dreamed of had become reality. Alexander had financed The Bridge, a cutting-edge center in the heart of New York City, where Sofia directed a team of specialists dedicated to children on the autism spectrum and their families. The center wasn't just a place of therapy, but a space where families could feel understood and supported. Lucas had become one of the center's first ambassadors. At 9 years old, he helped other children feel comfortable, sharing the strategies he had learned with Sofia. His extraordinary intelligence, channeled in the right way, had made him a little leader who inspired both peers and adults. Alexander had also transformed his company. Mendoza Pharmaceuticals had launched a research division dedicated to childhood neurological disorders, investing millions in innovative therapies and family support. His approach to business had changed. No longer just profit, but also significant social impact. But the most beautiful change was in his daily life. Alexander's villa, once silent and formal, now resonated with Lucas's laughter, Sofia's passionate conversations about her patients, family scenes where everything was discussed, from scientific discoveries to animated films. Sofia had taught Alexander that loving a special child didn't mean limiting his dreams, but expanding one's own definition of success. And Alexander had shown Sofia that the biggest dreams come true when you have the courage to pursue them with someone who shares your vision. One night, as they watched Lucas play in the garden with other children from the center during a party, Alexander took Sofia's hand. He was thinking about that night at the restaurant, when everything seemed to be going wrong. Actually, everything was going perfectly, according to a plan they couldn't see. Sofia smiled, remembering that Lucas always said the world is full of hidden patterns. Maybe he was right. In that moment, Lucas ran toward them, excited about something he had discovered. Instead of covering his ears or trying to avoid contact, he threw himself into both their arms, animatedly telling about the butterfly he had seen and how its wings followed a perfect mathematical sequence. Alexander and Sofia listened attentively, asking questions that fed his curiosity instead of stopping it. He had become a self-confident child, proud of his differences, surrounded by adults who celebrated his uniqueness instead of trying to normalize it. 2 years later, the story of Alexander, Sofia, and Lucas had become a symbol of hope for thousands of families across America. The Center, the Bridge, had opened locations in 6 cities, helping hundreds of children and their families find personalized life strategies and emotional support. Lucas, now 11 years old, had become a small phenomenon. His combination of extraordinary intelligence and unique perspective on the world had made him a sought-after speaker at talks on neurodiversity. He spoke naturally about his autistic experience, explaining to adults how the world looks through his eyes and demolishing stereotypes with the wisdom of someone who has learned to transform his differences into strengths. Alexander and Sofia had married in a simple but emotional ceremony, with Lucas as the witness of honor, who had moved everyone with a speech about the family you choose, not just the one you're born into. During the ceremony, instead of the traditional rice throwing, guests had released soap bubbles, creating a magical and sensorially pleasant moment for all the children present. The Center, the Bridge, had become an international model. Delegations from around the world came to New York City to study Sofia's innovative approach, which combined evidence-based therapies with deep respect for each child's individuality. The center didn't try to cure autism, but to equip children and families with the tools to thrive in a neurotypical world. One spring morning, while Sofia was conducting a group session with parents of newly diagnosed children, a mother broke down crying, telling of her fear for her 4-year-old son's future. She didn't know if he would ever have friends, fall in love, be happy. Sofia looked through the center's glass, where Lucas was helping a younger child build a block tower, patiently explaining how the geometric shapes fit together. She explained sweetly to the mother that 3 years ago, that boy's father was thinking the same things. Today, Lucas had friends who adored him for his authenticity, a family that celebrated him every day, and he was helping other children feel less alone. Happiness doesn't have a standard definition, but as many forms as people who live it. That night, during family dinner, Lucas made an announcement that surprised Alexander and Sofia. He wanted to write a book for children like him, but also for parents. He wanted to explain that being autistic doesn't mean being broken, but seeing the world with colors others can't perceive. Lucas's book, The World in Different Colors, was published a year later with support from Alexander's publishing house. It became a bestseller, translated into 12 languages, and Lucas began receiving letters from children and parents from around the world who recognized themselves in his story. One night, while reading some of these letters together, Lucas asked his father if he ever felt sad that he was autistic. Alexander looked him in the eyes. Those same green eyes that years before reflected only confusion and pain, and now shone with confidence and compassion. He responded that if he could go back and change something about him, he wouldn't change anything, absolutely nothing, because he was perfect exactly as he was. And thanks to him, he had learned that true love isn't about changing people. It helps them become the best version of themselves. That night, while Lucas slept peacefully in his room full of books and scientific experiments, Alexander and Sofia sat in their home's living room, looking at photos of all the children they had helped through the center. Alexander confessed he had learned that night at the restaurant, Sofia hadn't saved only Lucas, but also him. She had taught him that being a good father doesn't mean protecting the son from the world, but preparing the world to receive the son. Sofia responded that he had taught her that the biggest dreams come true when you share them with the right people. Lucas didn't need to be changed. The world needed to learn to listen to him. In that moment of perfect stillness, they both knew they had found something rare and valuable, a family built on acceptance, a shared mission, and the certainty that authentic love knows how to transform even the greatest challenges into opportunities for growth and connection. Because sometimes it takes a crisis to discover who we really are, that sometimes it takes the courage of a stranger to remind us that every child, regardless of their differences, deserves to be seen, understood, and loved for what they are. Like, if you believe every child deserves to be understood and accepted, comment what moment of the story impacted you most. Share to raise awareness about autism and neurodiversity. Subscribe for more stories of families that transform challenges into strength. Sometimes the most difficult crises hide the most beautiful opportunities. Sometimes a brave stranger can change a family's destiny, and sometimes different children are the ones who teach the world the most important values. Because true love isn't about changing people, it helps them shine in their uniqueness.